we put that team back on the map, man, like there were some bleak times there for a while.
For that next 5 or 6 years, he was the best power forward in the game.
There was a confidence that we believed if we went out and played the way we were capable, we could score every shift.
Now it's kind of league-wide. I want to come see the West Coast Express, see these guys in action.
That line sold tickets. That line cared about the community. That line gave back.
We knew that we would never be satisfied unless we would win the cup.
Everything, the whole thing. It's like a bad nightmare happened.
In a matter of seconds, lives basically changed forever.
Well, welcome to the bonus episode of Unreal West Coast Express. The format's going to be a little different in this than what you heard throughout the series. Now, since the completion of the podcast, I have been flattered. I've been humbled. There have been times that I've been overwhelmed personally with all of the glowing reviews, the commentary from the audience. And it's been really interesting for me to see and hear which parts of the series resonated with all of the listeners. So it just seemed to make sense to me to find out what the guys at the center of the story thought of how this story came together, how their story was presented. So for the first time in a long time, we have all of the members of the West Coast Express together. We've got Markus Naslund, Todd Bertuzzi, and Brendan Morrison. Thank you guys all for doing this. I want to dive right into this here, right off the top. And Markus, I'll start with you because you were the first phone call I ever made when I considered putting this project together. I want each of you to answer this, but Markus, you first. How did the series compare to what you thought it might be when I called you all of those months ago to do an interview?
Well, to be honest, I didn't even remember after. It took a while, and I didn't even think about something like this coming out of it. So, no, I was blown away with the quality of people that you got involved and the way you, well, at least for me, it got me emotionally involved. It brought back a lot of memories, and it was really nice to revisit.
What about you guys? How about you, Bert?
Yeah, I'll piggyback on Markus. I think the quality and credibility of the individuals that you had to come on the podcast and speak about our line, the years that we played together. And I think, like Markus, I think over time as I was listening, there was a lot of stuff that I don't remember and I forgot. It was a refresher, and I think, like the other guys are going to say, it brought back a lot of memories and a few what ifs. But I thought it was done tremendously. I think everyone that listened in on my end enjoyed it and learned a lot more than that we actually even really knew.
Mo?
Yeah, for me, I mean, it superseded any expectation that I had. It was you took all of us back, I think, on a journey in our career that were, for me, the best years of playing hockey, and just the intimate detail to see how everything was pieced together. Like Todd mentioned, a lot of the details you got into, I didn't remember and didn't understand the full story of how it all came together. So to kind of go back in time and relive those moments, like Markus said, was emotional, but it was also a lot of fun. And it had me fired up. Like, it made me want to play again. So it was it really hit home, and very appreciative of the job that you did.
So we're having this conversation now, but Todd, I'm wondering how much the three of you guys and maybe other people were talking during the series when each episode was coming out.
I think after an episode came out, I think after a couple days, it sunk in on different things that occurred and happened. I thought it was healthy discussion. I thought it was great discussion. I think there hasn't been a time where we've actually, just the three of us, have sat down and really had time to digest it. I know we all showed up in Vancouver for a ceremony, but there was a lot going on. I don't think we've actually had time to get away and actually have open discussions about a lot of things, a lot of positive things, good things, things that we wish could have been different and all that kind of stuff. But I think overall, it was just fun to connect and talk about a lot of things that went down on the podcast. For me, it was.
Markus, did you have former teammates and maybe peers reach out? And if so, what were those conversations like while this series was coming to fruition?
Maybe not so much teammates and peers, but family and friends here in Sweden that found out about the podcast. No, I think it just brings back the feeling when you listen to it, to the friendship that me, Todd, and Brendan had and still has. But it over the years, it's obviously difficult. Me living in Europe, it's different. It's difficult to stay in touch as closely as you'd like to. And this was a great opportunity to reconnect and hopefully get a chance to get together now when COVID is gone and all that stuff. Hopefully we can get together and talk about life in general and talk about our memories together, because we have so many. But like Todd said too, there is obviously that what if we believed that we were strong enough to at some point win the cup, and every team has to get over obstacles and challenges. I just hope at some point that we would get a lucky bounce that we maybe didn't deserve, because I think there was a lot of injuries and things that happened to key players at key moments that really rattled us.
So that's the downside, if you will, or the what if, the sliding doors, whatever you want to call it. But the upside to me, as I talk to you guys and I talk to a lot of your former teammates and managers and coaches, the upside is how you guys all grew up together. And Brendan, I don't know how it compared to going to college at Michigan, but you guys were so lucky, in my view, that most of that team was same age range. The fact that you guys all ended up on the same line is just wild, considering you all were drafted by organizations and all of these different things acquired by different general managers. But when you think about it now, Mo, how wild is it that you guys were able to almost have that college experience as you grew up together and grew up with this city to a certain degree in Vancouver?
Yeah, I think that's a good comparable, Scotty. When you go to school, you're around like-minded people around the same age and you're doing the same things. And that's really what happened to us in Vancouver. We all started our careers with one team. For whatever reason, things didn't work out. We go to Vancouver, obviously a tremendous hockey market. I'm not going to say we all got a second lease on our careers. We were all still young, but I think we all had a bit of a chip on our shoulder and wanted to prove that we could play and be successful. And to be able to do that, not only with Markus and Todd, but other guys on our teams during that time that were all relatively close in age. Yeah, you did kind of grow up together. We all had kids that were similar ages. We all had similar interests. When you play professional sports and especially hockey, there's, for 6-7 months out of the year, you probably spend more time with your teammates than you do with your families. So, essentially your team becomes your family. And, I was very fortunate to be surrounded by tremendous people, not only hockey players, but people, in the dressing room and off the ice and experiencing different cities when you travel. And it was really it was a fun environment to be a part of.
Todd, I'll turn this over to you, and maybe you guys can go around, and if there's something you want to throw in there, please do. There were a lot of people who took the opportunity to lend their voices to this series. Which of them stood out for you or surprised you or perhaps even made you emotional, Todd, when you were listening to this series?
I think it was it was everyone. It was Brad, Berkey. It was a great collection, a group of people that had the utmost respect for us and what we were able to accomplish together. I think when you look at it, sometimes you can have individual success, but when you can have two guys doing it, but when you have three guys that are on the same page, that's not an easy thing to accomplish. You got three different minds, but the one thing that we collectively want to do is push each other to become better. And I think when Mo said chip on the shoulder, I believe we had a chip on the shoulder to prove to the organizations that we were drafted by that they got rid of us too early, that they didn't see what they had. And I think we all came together and drove each other and pushed each other. And the best part is we all wanted success for each other. There wasn't a day, like if I didn't have a point and these guys had two, I was as happy for them as if it was the other way around. That was the thing. We weren't selfish. We tried to make sure that everyone distributed the puck, got together and all that kind of stuff. It was just, it's for me, it's the fact that the three of us could coexist and keep a very good, solid friendship, but also have the on-ice success together.
What about for you, Markus? Was there anyone who lent his voice to this podcast that stood out?
Well, I have to agree with Todd. I think everyone that was a part of it are high-profile hockey people and also people that I respect. So it's flattering hearing their view of our line and also what we meant for the game. The greatest player that's ever played said that he thought that we kind of changed the game a little bit in the way that we were thinking and how we played together in a tough era where it was low scoring and it was difficult to get chances, but we found ways to do that. And that's obviously very humbling hearing that. But I agree. I think you don't realize it before it's gone until it's gone, and it was so obvious for me when I didn't have Todd and Brendan by my side. It was such a challenge to get the scoring chances or to play my game. So I owe these two so much for my career, just in the way they compromised many times, but also how they gave me an opportunity to play my game. So I think that's also one part that makes our relationship unique, is that I think we fed off each other, and we were pushing each other too, and we were hard mostly on Mo, but because he was the distributor and he was the one who got the puck initially and did the dirty work in the D zone. But we had utmost respect for what Brendan brought to our line, and so I think it was such a wonderful time, and looking back at it, I just wish that it lasted a little longer.
Yeah, I don't know if you guys can manufacture it here during this call, but Mo, we actually had a listener saying, how heated did it actually get between the three of them on the bench or in the dressing room? Like, what did that look like?
Well, I think a lot of people would call it entertainment. It was funny. There'd be times when I remember one time Todd and I didn't talk to each other for like 5 days. Like he would walk by me on the plane and wouldn't even look at me. And finally, I think it culminated in a big wrestling match or something like that. Or these guys jumped me in Florida one time, and after a pregame skate, I was so exhausted for the game that night trying to fight these guys in the dressing room. I was just gassed. But no, it was funny. I mean, it was as serious and as it got at times. I think we all understood the right intention was there. And one, it was team success, right? And it was, okay, what can we do to help the team win games? And yeah, there were certain times when, maybe a guy was available and didn't get the puck, and they wouldn't be happy about it, because there was a certain stretch there for a couple of years where we felt like every time we stepped on, we had a chance to score. And as an offensive player, I mean, that doesn't happen all the time. But when you're in that place mentally and you feel like you can do that, it's I guess they kind of talk about being in the zone. And when you're in the zone and you have that moment, you want the puck all the time because you feel you can make a difference. So I think there were some times when that did happen, and and we'd come back and get a little heated, or get upset if we didn't score, or we only scored one in a game. But hey, I think that's what pushed us and made us have that chemistry together. There was never any grudge for too long. There was never any hard feelings. I mean, we were all fairly mature about it, and we could move on and just understand that we each wanted the best for each other.
How often did you guys wrestle, Bert?
I think we wrestled enough. I think Mo's not inaccurate. I kind of put it towards Mo was the quarterback, and then you had two prima donna wide receivers that wanted a little bit of attention and a lot of attention, and it was up to Mo on how to handle it and distribute the puck properly. But like Mo said, it was we were young, we wanted to win, we wanted to be successful, and like he said, when we stepped on the ice, it felt like any time that we wanted to, we can score. And I'll say what Markus said about when Wayne said that, who I idolized for a long time. When he says that our line possibly changed the style of play when it was clutch and grabbing, it was slow. There was hooking, water skiing, all this kind of stuff, and we played kind of a globetrotter, kind of east, west, north, south kind of style of hockey that other lines weren't doing, and teams had to prepare and change on how they played us. And I think that was one of the biggest compliments I received, or we received from the podcast.
That was a curveball, man. When Wayne came in early on in the podcast, I was blown away by it. I mean, it was really shocking and something super, super cool. Like Markus and Todd both said, I mean, I grew up on the West Coast and idolized him as well. So for him to come in and say that, I mean, it was like, I need to rewind that and listen to it again. Does this really happen? So that was cool. Thanks.
Well, and he contributed in a number of different ways, but I do want to play the clip that Markus referenced because a couple other people said the same thing. But for listeners who may have forgotten, or if you guys don't remember all the details, here's what Wayne Gretzky had to say about your impact on the NHL.
Well, they were tremendous. And what made the line so unique, obviously their hockey instincts and their unselfishness to play together. But I say this to people, back when they were doing what they did, we were still in that era of how do we prevent goals? No 4-on-4s, clutching and grabbing and hooking were heavily involved. And Mario was probably the most outspoken person that really finally got everybody to understand that, the game has to change. We can't be hooking and holding. And the slashing that went on, that we needed to let the skill of the game come to the forefront. So what those guys did in that era is pretty remarkable. Today, there's 3-on-3s and 4-on-4s, and you get a power play, the face-off starts in the offensive zone. So we've gone from trying to figure out ways to prevent goals to try to figure out ways, how can we have more goals and make it more exciting for the fans? And that line is part of the reason or the success of the National Hockey League, to why people wanted to see the rules changed, because of skill and talent like those three guys had.
It's pretty incredible to hear him say that. Ed Jovanovski said something similar. Alex Auld alluded to that as well. And I'll be honest, guys, until Wayne Gretzky said that, I hadn't really thought of how the NHL changed. Until I was going through this docuseries, I hadn't thought, you know what? During the lockout, if they could have looked at one team and said, this is how we want the league to play, even though you guys didn't have the ultimate success, you guys entertained in such a fashion that it's almost like they took that template and said, okay, we kind of want it to look like this. Markus, did you ever feel like an innovator in that sense, or have your teams looked at in that sense?
No, not when you're in the midst of it, but I remember that we had a big following outside of Vancouver too, and people came up to us and said that they really enjoyed us playing. And when we went to other cities, we had a lot of fans cheering for our team, which might happen even now. I don't know, but I think that it might have had something to do with us playing a little differently. And I'm not saying that we were the only line or team that did it, but our goal was to try to to have fun, and with that came entertainment, because we and I have to say there too, I think Mark Crawford gave us a lot of freedom. He trusted us enough that he knew that we would make up for the mistakes that we would have. It's impossible not to make mistakes if you're playing a high tempo game and you challenge players. But he trusted us, and he was because if we didn't feel, or at least I can speak for myself, if I don't feel the trust of the coach and know that I'm okay, he's going to throw me out there on the power play again, even if I'm screwing up once or twice, it's difficult to play loose and play relaxed, and you need to do that to be able to make the extra plays for the line to score.
Todd, it's interesting that Markus brings up Mark Crawford, because I wanted to ask you about that. One of the things that fascinated me throughout the course of the series was your relationship with Mark Crawford, and obviously got to a breaking point at the time that you were eventually traded to Florida. But then later in the series, you mentioned, Todd, you go to a couple different places and you realize that you might have missed what you had. Was he the right coach for you? And do you think you would have gotten to where you got to if it wasn't for the style you were playing?
I can easily, in this podcast right now, put my feelings aside on the situation. Those are past situations, and over time, things heal. You think of things differently. You grow up, you mature. I've been around 2 different teams, cities. But I will say, you can't play the game without confidence. And the one thing that Mark did not take away from us was our confidence. Confidence does everything for you as an athlete. You can accomplish so much if you're at the peak of your profession and you're feeling it each and every night. Like Markus said, you're not getting benched for a turnover. A lot of our success came from 50-50 plays that a lot of lines aren't allowed to do, but we were able to do them and try them, and know that that's where Mo comes in. That a lot of the down low, neutral zone 50-50 plays that we're trying to make, we knew that Mo was already playing a 200-foot game before that was even thought of, that we had protection all the time with him. So I would say, yes, Mark gave us the confidence and all that, but it was also who you played with. We knew that if we were going to try things and do things, that Mo was able and intelligent enough as a hockey player to go back and take care of responsibilities that sometimes we took for granted, but we knew that he would have our back. And it's no different than when you get to the offensive zone. Mo felt the same way at certain times, that Mo was going to get the puck in certain situations, and we just fed off that. But it was a combination, like I said, confidence. Confidence is everything. You can ask any great athlete at their peak of their profession that they contributed to the confidence that the person behind you gave you, instilled in you, and allowed you to play that style of hockey.
Brendan, a couple of minutes ago, Markus mentioned the following you guys had on the road. One of the other moments that stood out for me when I was putting this together was when Trevor Linden said, we'd go into places like Detroit, and we all know what that organization did and what it represents. And people in Detroit would be saying to you guys, oh, we're so glad you're here because you're so much fun to watch and these games are great. We had a listener ask this, so I'll use that as the conduit to it. For each of you, and we'll start with you, Brendan, what was your favorite road city to play in and why?
Well, there's probably a couple, Scotty. Like I did like coming to Detroit just because of the fact that I played at University of Michigan, and as a college kid, we'd go down and play at the Joe sometimes. So I had some familiarity with that rink. And like you said, Detroit had some powerhouse teams in the late 90s and early 2000s. And they were like a measuring stick for us, if you will. So it was always a big challenge going in there playing against guys like Yzerman and Fedorov and, the whole lineup. I mean, it's endless, right? Hall of Famers there, Shanahan, and the list goes, Brett Hull, the list goes on and on. But one of the rinks two other rinks I enjoyed the most would be Montreal, the Bell Center, and Madison Square Garden. Those, they're just the history of Madison Square Garden. When you walk out of the dressing room down the tunnel, and you just see all the pictures of the performing acts that have been there in the past. Not only athletics, but musical artists and things like that. It's a pretty neat environment. And then being in Montreal, I think the fan base is extremely educated, and they are appreciative of good hockey, whether you're the home team or the visiting team. And it was just always a real fun buzz anytime we played there.
What about you, Markus?
Well, I probably have to pick two places. Then I enjoyed going to Toronto because it was, they had a lot of fans in Vancouver too, so there was always a lot of hype for the home games in Vancouver. But also going out and playing in Toronto, there was such a focus on, because it didn't happen that often, maybe once a year, or if we're lucky a couple of times. But that's one of the places that I enjoyed and got me up a little extra. And I would agree with Brendan too, even New York. I think that it's such a special arena to play in. And New York always had high-end talent. They've never really, during our era, they didn't really put together good teams, but they had good players, and it was fun to try to measure up against them too.
And you, Todd?
Pretty much what the guy said. I think me being from Eastern Ontario and having family and friends who spent many late hours when we're playing on the West Coast, being up and watching our games and all that. But when you're coming into Toronto, you got all your family and friends around, and Toronto fans are very, very passionate. They love their team, and to be a Canadian team coming in there from the West Coast, it was always like who was the bigger team. And then going to New York was always awesome. The glitz, the glamour, the arena was the atmosphere, and I certainly love playing in LA too. Just with what Wayne did over there, we were able to always go in there on a little bit of a road trip, have a couple of days, walk Hermosa Beach, and then you go into that arena, and I don't know, it just felt like make believe sometimes, and it was fun to go on and put on some good shows over there too.
Nobody said Minnesota. Come on.
Shocking, hey? Yeah.
Well, we did have one person ask this. Do you guys still have nightmares about Wes Walz? And he's obviously referring to the series against Minnesota in the playoffs. Do you guys think about that at all, or is it only when it gets brought up by somebody like this during conversation?
No, I can actually go back sometimes and think of him specifically, because he was a monster in that series. How he skated and just the level he played on during that series. And I mean, it happens even now when I watch this Swedish leagues. There's sometimes guys that really step up in the playoff series, and that brings me back to what he and that series in general, being up 3-1 and not being able to pull it off. That's a tough one to swallow.
What about you guys?
Yeah, no, it's. I find myself thinking about it more this time of year, just when the playoffs are on. It's what you play for. It's the most important time of the year, and as you get older, you appreciate it more and more. And things were lining up so perfect that year for us, and we gave them life in Game 5. And as we all know, momentum shifts are huge, and the pendulum swings one way, and another team can't regain it. And I think about the Game 7 quite often back home, where we were up 2-0 at home late in the second period, and maybe 99 out of 100 times we win that game. And I remember they got a really lucky goal at the end of the second period. We had full possession of the puck, and I think it was Marek Malik who went to go clear the puck around the net and made the right play. He got the puck up off the ice, and it hit like a shaft in midair and went over the net, landed in front of the net. And I don't know who scored, but they put the puck into a wide open net. And it was just like, how does that even happen? But then we're up 2-1, but they get a bit of life there. We get a little tense at home, and we know the story. So man, that one hurts a lot for sure. Yeah, I don't know if frequent nightmares would be the right answer, but it hurts for sure when you do think about it. But it's one of those things too, when out of sight, out of mind, you don't think about it. But again, when playoffs come up, I do think about it.
Todd, I should probably just ask you directly now, because part of the myth or lore of that series, whether it was true or not, was that you chirped some Minnesota fans, told them not to buy tickets, and then there was the alleged comment going by the Wild bench that you told them to get their golf clubs ready. Did that stuff actually happen or not?
I don't think it reflected on the outcome of the series, but sometimes my big mouth would get me into trouble, and yeah, it's pretty much accurate. But to win you know what? I played on different teams and all that, and I've been around a lot of Stanley Cup champions. And I've now that I've gotten older, I've been able to hang out with a lot of the older guys from the alumni and hear their stories and all that. And it really takes so much luck and so much health and how to handle adversity and bad breaks and all that. And I'm not going to say we were immature in that department. I think we could have handled it a lot better, but it's easier said now that I'm older, how to handle it. Cause I've been in a few rooms where we lost to Anaheim in the Western Finals, and there was a lot of bad breaks and bumps, but just how collectively that dressing room, Detroit, handled adversity and situations. I think, I know me in general, I could have did a lot better on how I handle it and how I approached it, but I'll never give them credit. They were just lucky.
Well, one of the things that sticks out to me about the three of you, and that's a good example of it, is that it doesn't always work out, but you guys were personalities, and you had a team full of personalities as well. And we heard from a lot of them during the course of this podcast. We don't always see that in hockey, but you guys had so many different personalities on that team that people could relate to. Were you guys cognizant of that at the time, Markus?
I don't know. I think we had an open locker room where everyone felt comfortable, and maybe that came from we had strong personalities and colorful individuals. But we also had guys that they were fairly quiet and still were a huge part of our team and unsung heroes. I mean, if you look at a guy like Sami Sal or Matthias Olden, how good they were. I mean, they were top defensemen in the league, and they weren't loud, but they had their personality and their style of playing the game. But I don't know if we made a big deal out of the different personalities, but it was a fun bunch to be around, and maybe that's what attracted us to the fans, or the fans attracted. Oh, I don't know if I put it the wrong way around. You're the one who usually helps me out with that, but no. But I think it started with us enjoying each other and the friendship, and I also think that Berkey wouldn't bring in people that didn't have that type of personality that would fit in our locker room, because I think we had a tight group all the way to the guys that were healthy scratches. They were still a big part of our group, and when we went out for dinners or whatever we did. So it would have been a really fun bunch of guys to win with. That's for sure.
But like Nazi, to your point there about personalities and that, I don't know if you guys remember, but I can't remember the exact year, but we were in Nashville and we were struggling a little bit down the stretch. And that's when we had Tyler Bauck and Wade Brookbank on our team. And I think they had a coaches meeting and they basically told those guys, listen, guys, you're not going to play for the rest of the year unless somebody gets hurt, but we need you guys to be good teammates and, support the guys, work hard in practice. So we had a big team meeting and we needed to win that night, and we got shellacked. But those guys showed up to the game. I don't know if you guys remember, but they showed up and they bought all new attire, cowboy apparel, boots, hat, jeans, like jean shirt. They show up to the game. We got shellacked like 5-0 in like a big, huge game. and the team went out that night, and those guys thought they were going to be in the biggest trouble ever, right? Because they were kind of, but they're good teammates. They're getting the boys loose and doing the right thing. And, I think the coaches appreciated that. And I know the players did, but that just puts a smile on the face when you think of guys like that and stories like that.
Yeah.
Well, that's the beauty of it, I would think, especially in that era. And Todd, maybe you can comment on this as well, is that those players didn't get the publicity. The occasional one did, like a Harold Druken, because he has the big game. And so his name's in headlines for a little bit. But the Lee Gorans of the world, or the Brookbanks, or the Boaks, it seemed like you guys all just meshed together, Todd. Nobody really seemed too far out of place.
No, you're only as good as your depth and the character. Obviously, we were on the first, second line or whatever, but everyone below knew their role and contributed. And you can only go as so far. A line can carry you so far. You need your character guys and your third, fourth liners to chip in, and we had that. We had toughness and the Donald Brashears, Brad Mays. We had Matt Cooks. The Sedins were coming up. We had a lot of guys that contributed a lot of times. Like, sure, we were on the score sheet a lot of time, but there was also a lot of guys who contributed to big time moments that happened in Canuck history. And I think it was a credit to our group that we all made everyone feel comfortable and worthy and part of the one goal, where no one was ever shone or thought of any differently, because we could only all get it done collectively. And I think that's what Markus and Mo say. With the group of misfit characters that we had in that room, and how we came together so quickly and turned that organization around and the thought of that team, you're only as good as the next guy beside you. And I think our captain and Markus and our leadership group made sure that everyone knew their role and how important each and every one was to the common goals, trying to win.
So for most of the listeners, this was their first chance to hear the story as told by the people who lived it, that behind the scenes version that I think a lot of us are attracted to. You guys knew that story, and you knew the behind the scenes portion. So I'm wondering for each of you, why it was compelling to listen to the podcast for you guys.
Well, if I were to start here, I would say that there was a lot of other stuff that might have not made the headlines or that we might have been aware of, but was happening parallel to us playing, that you spotlighted, and even listening to the other people talking about us too. It's just interesting how they view what we did. So that, and also bringing it all together with the timelines and just seeing how much coincidence happens in everyone's lives, but also in your career.
What about for you, Todd?
Like I stated earlier in the show, there was a lot of stuff that I've forgotten, I haven't remembered, and through different kind of circumstances, but there was a couple episodes I had to re-listen over. There's it's even, and not to be disrespectful, but there were some players that came through very briefly and all that I forgot about at times. I think as you get older and you move on and you played on different teams, but just hearing some of the different players, hearing different things that happen and all that, like for instance, not to bring it up, but I didn't know Mayday had 2 goals at one game, and he still continues to tell me about it, that he had 2 goals and 2 fights, and if he would have had 3 goals and 2 fights, it would have been the greatest game of his life. So, and he constantly reminds me of that. But no, it was just it was nice to get a refresher. Obviously, there's some hard things to listen to and hear about and all that, but I think as you get older and you understand, it was just, I don't know. Overall, it was just nice to hear the amount of people that you went out and got to contribute to the show. And it was very nice to hear Mo talk and Nazi talk, and it just brought back a lot of, I'll tell you right now, brought back 90% of better memories than negative ones. And it was kind of fun just putting yourself back in that time zone again, and the road trips, the plane rides, the different series, different situations. It ended up being a refresher for myself of that time there.
Well, that game that you referenced, Todd, is obviously the March 8th game. And we all know this. That's the most difficult part of the story to talk about. It's tougher than all of the rest of it, but it had to be discussed. One of the things Brendan said to me at some point during this was that you guys had never really talked about it since the time, which I completely understand. So I'm wondering if there was anything cathartic or therapeutic about listening to it and maybe closing a chapter there.
I don't know. I'm going to go through the rest of life always remembering a situation. I'm going to use my own. It is what it is. I understand, and everything is unfortunate. It's unfortunate the way everything happened. It's unfortunate lives changed. A lot of lives changed, and a lot of people don't know how drastically some other lives changed throughout the process. But no, I'm okay talking about it now. It's time is healed, time has moved on, and I just something you live with for the rest of your life, and I'm okay with it. I just to add one more thing on it, the one thing I did gather and I picked up is I wish I would have been able to hang in there for another year or two instead of leaving to Florida. I wish I was stronger. It shit kicked me, and it took a lot out of me. And I don't think I was able to. I wasn't at a point in my life or in my career to be able to continue to confront and be in that situations. But I really wish that I would have been able to have been strong enough to stay in there, because I know for a fact, even though the Sedins were coming and they were pushing for number one ice time, number one power play time, as a competitors, we would have competed with them to make sure that never happened, even if it did happen. And I just think if you would have had the two line combinations that were at the peak of their careers going together, I think there could have been some great things to happen ahead. So I would say probably that.
Brendan, you're the one who brought it up to me. Was there anything cathartic or therapeutic for you going through that part of it?
Well, I mean, obviously a very difficult and an emotional thing. And I will say, like, I know, and there's nothing wrong with this. I know Todd and Markus were tighter than I was probably with Markus, or I was with Todd. So they may have had some discussion about it at some point, but I always respected Todd's space regarding that, and never wanted to bring up that incident. And I battled with it internally at times. Like, should I reach out to him and just check on him, see how he's doing, or is it gonna? Well, what you're trying to do positively, will it be superseded by having the negativity of that situation creep back in? So I always kind of avoided it consciously, and I've always wanted to, at some point, not like selfishly for me, I needed closure on it or anything like that, but I always just wanted to make sure that Todd was okay.
What about you, Markus?
Yeah, I think it's tough to explain the impact that it had. I mean, especially on Todd, and how we all felt for Todd going through this. But it made things complicated with the focus on, I mean, the negativity that was brought on by the media and constantly nagging at Todd when we went to different cities, or always, there was always reminders. So we couldn't, even though after Todd's suspension was done and we played together again, it wasn't like you could put it behind and move forward. I don't know what we as a line could have done differently. I mean, I talked to Todd quite a bit, and but it's obviously impossible to undo. And I know Todd wanted to undo it, but then you're just faced with reality, which was unfortunate. And this is way beyond hockey, because hockey is one thing. That's, I mean, we could have hopefully been a good line for a few more years, but also just everything else that came with it, and I mean, I don't know half of it, but I'm aware of the mountain that Todd had to climb.
Well, as Todd said a few minutes ago, 90% of the listen brought back enjoyable memories. That's obviously not an enjoyable one, but 90% of the listening for the people who responded and the people who gave commentary, which was the audience, was positive. And I just want to relay a couple of those things to you. One of the things that get said constantly in my mentions anytime we put out an episode is, look, these were the guys who either got me into hockey or brought me back to hockey. Like, those three players and that team, that's the reason I'm still a hockey fan today, or that's why I actually reinvested myself in the game. Todd, it's been 20 years, but how does that make you feel when you hear that from someone?
I've actually heard it often from going to a lot of the alumni events and actually playing in these events. You play against people that grew up watching you, that were around you, that got into the game because of our line, because of us individually. I had a gentleman, I think he was 35 in Toronto event, came up to me, and he had his 44 Bertuzzi jersey on, and he said, "This is the reason why." And he's not from here; he's from another country, and he was paying attention, and then he moved over here, and that got him to hockey. And I know there's a lot of those situations and things that have happened as I've gone around and met people and all that. And it's quite humbling to know that yourself, you just considered just a hockey player, and all you want to do is just go play hockey and win, that you would have these kind of impacts on individuals and people. It's pretty special. They're like you said, there's about 99% positive feedback and all that kind of stuff, and there's always that 1%, but those people are sad in general. But it's all been rewarding and very humbling as you get older, the kind of impact that you actually had.
Do either of you guys want to jump in on that at all?
From my perspective, I don't know if there can be a single better compliment when you have somebody come up to you and says that they started watching hockey or they got back into hockey because of your team or your line or you as an individual. I mean, that's probably the pinnacle compliment right there.
All right. One of the other stories that popped up a few times, and I don't know why this surprised me so much, but there were a bunch of listeners who wanted to detail to me that when they were listening to this podcast, they were having conversations about it with their families. So you'd have a person who said, my dad and I are both listening to it, and when we meet up during the week, we're talking about the episode and we're reliving what we went through as fans together. And there were sometimes 3 generations involved, where grandfathers were talking to grandsons and their sons in between. What kinds of conversations were you guys having with your families during this series? Because your kids were pretty young when you guys were in the height of your powers, Markus?
Yeah, both my daughters were listening and brought up to me that I mean, they see how hard I am on myself about what could have happened, and so they said you should be proud of what you did, which is flattering coming from your own kids. But I think the point you made too, Scott, with families talking about the podcast and talking about the memory, that's what makes playing in Canada so special too, that the impact you have on people's lives and how much it means to people, and just the passion the Canadian people have for their game. And that's why if I were to look at the positives, is that I had a chance to play 12 years in my mind, the greatest city in North America, and with a fan base that is so passionate, and that I'm keeping my fingers crossed that they at some point get to see a championship team there too. I mean, they came in the league in 1970 and still hasn't won a championship, so they deserve it. But yeah, I'll leave it at that. I'm very happy that I got to be a little part of the history.
Brendan, I'll finish with you on the family question as well, because I'm sure your kids were pretty interested.
Yeah, it was interesting to hear comments from, like you said, different generations, from my mom and dad or my in-laws to my kids. And I think, like Markus said, like, you know, be proud of don't dwell on things that might have happened or could have happened, but, you know, think about the things that you guys did accomplish. You know, it's I know Markus and Todd are similar to me and most hockey players in general, is you don't ever really talk about yourself or your career, or you never, you know, I meet people today and they have no idea what I've done in the past. And, you know, none of us talk about, open your conversation with, I was a professional athlete for 14, 15 years. You know, it's just kind of this memory that's kind of been tucked away in this box a little bit. And it's like this treasure chest, and it's been found again in a sense. And it's brought back a ton of great emotions and feelings, and to have the story told by a third party like you, and to bring in so many other sources who are close to the story or the journey, and to get their perspectives and opinions, like you said, former teammates like Jovo and, you know, Trev, and then you have management involved, and the Sedins, Danny and Hank, and you know, guys that played at a high level for a long period of time, and to get their perspective on things, and just to kind of get a sense of how they appreciated that time period. And it's like it's a lifetime keepsake that you've kind of put together for that time period. And it's very, very unique and special.
Well, I don't know if there's anything else you guys want to say, but I want to say this to all three of you now that we're all together. Thank you so much for trusting me with your story. I didn't send you guys any money. I didn't do anything other than call each of you and say, I'd like to put this together. And you all said yes, and you didn't have to. And you knew that parts of this were going to be difficult, but you all trusted me to tell this as accurately as possible. And I'm so grateful that you guys were willing to do that. So I just want to say from me to each one of you, thank you so much.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Well, I hope one day it'll work out, maybe in the not too distant future, to get all of you in the same room together and we can do this live, and maybe we can have some interaction with some people who enjoyed watching you guys and following you and listening to this podcast so much. Until then, I wish all of you guys and your families well. To all of the listeners and viewers out there, stay tuned. We'll have updates on any of that to follow. But thank you very much for listening. This has been a blast. Thanks, guys.
Thanks, Scotty.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening to and watching Unreal West Coast Express. Make sure you're subscribed to the podcast or on YouTube for exclusive content and news about future seasons. For more information, head to unrealsports.com. That's Unreal, UNREEL sports.com.